Hello, welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about how we can go ahead and create a Logic Apps MCP server using the new API Center wizard. And then we're going to go ahead and add it as an MCP server and tool inside of Copilot Studio and go ahead and call it from there. So let's go ahead, let's check it out. All right, so before we get into the walkthrough, let's talk a little bit about why we might want to do this. Why would we want to go ahead and use Logic Apps as an MCP server? I'm going to assume if you're on this video, you have some awareness of MCP, but it is an open protocol that allows for the integration between large language model applications or agents, your tools, and your data sources. Now, Azure Logic Apps has more than 1,400 different connectors that allows an organization to go ahead and connect to those data sources, whether they're APIs, file systems, databases, AI models, and much, much more. Now, Logic Apps is enterprise ready, meaning you can go ahead and connect to your back-end private networks without the use of the on-premise data gateway. Since it is a single tenant offering, you also have the ability to implement managed identity between your connectors and those resources, especially the ones in Azure itself. If you have more needs over scaling, this is also something that you get to control because this is your compute, your network, your storage. So you've got full control from that perspective. You also have what's known as built-in connectors that you can leverage. So there's around 40-ish or so. These run in your dedicated compute. These allow you for additional throughput. So if you've got large batches of SQL Server queries you need to go ahead and run, and you're currently getting throttled because you're using a multi-tenant connector, well, you can go ahead and use the built-in and basically avoid that particular situation. The same thing would apply with other sources like SAP as well. Now, another interesting thing about Logic Apps Standard is that we offer an app concept, which I think maps quite well to an MCP server. So what this allows you to do is create functional groupings of MCP servers and tools that allows you to go ahead and centralize your capabilities. So yes, you could go ahead and create, say, cloud flows, and you could expose those as tools, but how do you go ahead and share those across the enterprise? And how do you go ahead and secure those in a uniform way? This is one of the opportunities with using Logic Apps Standard is you can go ahead and do that. So you can go ahead and take, say, your SharePoint or your, like, say, Salesforce or ServiceNow and build MCP server offerings from them, centralize them, then implement authentication and authorization, and really use that across your organization instead of having many of those things inside of your company. The other thing that you can go ahead and do here is you can mix and match. You know, I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and create a MCP server quickly through the API Center wizard, but you can go and update that. You can go ahead and include, your email connector, or you can go ahead and add additional connectors itself, even custom connectors, or, code, APIs. You can mix and match all of these different, connections and basically expose that through a centralized MCP server. Now, another thing that is really important, and you're going to see this as we go through the demo, is that we've implemented MCP servers with security top of mind. And so as part of that, we enable Easy Auth, which is Microsoft Entra ID authentication. This allows you to go ahead and secure your MCP servers and go ahead and make them available to call. So when we go ahead and consume the MCP server from Copilot Studio, we're going to use OAuth 2 because that's what you should be doing. Unless, there's a real good reason to use an API key, but you should not be using anonymous. All right, so there are a few steps that's going to take place here. The first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and build our MCP server. We're going to leverage API Center to go ahead and do it. The reason for this is it is the fastest way. You're going to see how quickly you can go ahead and provision an MCP server through the help of API Center. Now, you can do this manually yourself. Any Logic Apps Standard instance can also be configured as an MCP server. For now, you do have to configure some of your security manually. The API Center experience does that for you, so that is the streamlined way to go do this. Now, when we use API Center, we're going to have an app registration created as part of the whole security setup. We will need to update this app registration, and we will add a secret to it. When Copilot Studio wants to authenticate, they want to use a secret, so we'll go ahead and add that. Now what we'll do is we need to obtain some OAuth details from our app registration. These are the inputs that are going to be required when we add a tool in CPS. We'll go ahead and add the MCP server and tool in CPS, and then we'll go ahead and use it. So without further ado, let's go jump into Azure. All right, to get started, I've got a Logic App standard instance. It is empty, it has no workflows. For now, that is a prerequisite, so just make sure you're starting at that point. Then what I've got is API Center. Now this is a free version that I've gone ahead and provisioned in the Azure portal. So just type API Center and it's a pretty seamless experience to sort of go ahead and provision that. The free one will work as we're using here. I'm then going to go to Discovery, MCP Preview. Then we have the Azure Logic Apps. We can go ahead and register. Now what we need to do is find that Logic App, that empty Logic App. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is search for a connector. Now in this case, we're going to use SharePoint, and we're going to go ahead and connect to a SharePoint list where we will go ahead and get product reviews. So we're just going to use, there's a get items. Obviously we can select more than one. I'm just trying to keep things quite simple here. You can go ahead for each action that you go ahead and choose here. That would be one MCP tool. That will equate to one workflow inside of Logic App Standard. So we're just going to use get items. That's going to be one. Go ahead and check out my other videos where I show selecting more than one. Now we do need to go ahead and create a connection. Okay, I've gone ahead and created a connection, so we'll just go ahead and click save. So now what we've got here is we've got a action that's configured. This is going to be our tool. Now we need to make some configurations. So we want to come in here. The first thing we're going to go ahead and do is update this description. This is coming from the connector itself. We want this to be more relevant to our business process. Okay, so I've updated that to reflect product reviews for Fourth Coffee, our fictitious coffee company that sells coffee B2C. And we're going to have a chat experience or agent experience that allows us to go ahead and review product reviews. The next thing we need to do is get the site address and the list name. So currently this is set to model, but we want to go ahead and configure this beforehand. So we're going to switch this to user, and we'll select the list name to be user as well. And then we'll go ahead and select our SharePoint site and our list from these dropdowns. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done that. So I've got those basically set up for me as well. Now there's not additional parameters that we need to set, but we could go ahead and filter or limit columns, etc. as needed. Now what we'll go ahead and do is click on Save Changes. And then at the bottom here, we're going to go ahead and click Register. What's going to happen under the hood is we're updating that Logic App, we're creating that workflow, and then we're also going to go ahead and register this MCP server with API Center. So this is actually important because we want to go ahead and make this discoverable for our organization as well. That's kind of the goal of API Center, is it provides some governance for admins to go ahead and set these things up, but it also makes it discoverable for developers who don't want to go ahead and reinvent the wheel. Now it is registered, so one thing we can go ahead and do is head over to API Center portal, click on settings, and then we'll go ahead and view in the API Center portal. Now we'll need to log in here, so we can go ahead and do that. Also, you do need a specific role in order to access this. It is a data reader role, and then here we can go ahead and see our SharePoint entry, and we also have the ability to go ahead and copy the URL. So go ahead and click this button. We will need this URL once we get over to Copilot Studio. Okay, so while in the Azure portal, something that we now need to go do is we need to go find an app registration. So if we click on app registration, then we might be easy to sort, create it on. And so we should see here an actually entry that we just created. Now you'll find a clue because it'll start with MCP-logic. So here we've got the product review CPS. This is our app registration. Now there's some details that we need to basically retrieve here. And sorry, I've got to blur some of this stuff out, but we do need the application client ID. We're also going to need this directory tenant ID as well. So go ahead and copy those values. The next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a secret. So click on certificates and secrets, client secrets, new client secret. You can call this whatever you want. Now I'm just going to pause the video, but what's going to happen is after I go ahead and click add, you're going to see the value show up here. Go ahead and copy that value out. Now I'm back on the overview page just because I didn't want to show that to you. But the next area we need to go to is expose an API. And here we're going to see a scope that's already been created for us. Go ahead and copy that to your clipboard. We're going to need that as well. And you might as well, while you're here, head over to Authentication. And in a few minutes here or moments here, we're going to go ahead and add a redirect URL. But just hang tight here and just leave this as is. So we're ready to head over to Copilot Studio. And so I've just created a brand new agent inside of Copilot Studio. It's quite simple, just like fourth coffee, product feedback. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is click on Add Tool. So we'll go ahead and click that button. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is click on Model Context Protocol and then Add New Tool, then click on Model Context Protocol. This is where we're going to use some of the values that we just went ahead and copied. So what we'll do is we'll start with the server name. We can call this whatever, but I'm going to call this Logic Apps Product MCP. Now you do have to keep this less than 30 characters. Hopefully that's less than 30 characters, but we'll see. And then we'll just call this Product Review Server. And then this is where we need the server URL. So this is that URL that I had showed you in the API Center itself. So I'll go ahead and copy that in here. Now, in general, what you can expect is this is the URL of our Logic App URL, followed by API/MCP, but best to get that directly from API Center so you don't have to guess as well. Now, actually, one thing I'll show you, if you don't want to use that API portal, because that does require a little bit of setup, you can go back into the API Center. So let me get there. So in API Center, click on APIs. Then you should see the SharePoint resource that we just went ahead and created. Then you can head down into deployments, and then you can actually see the website here as well. So that's another way of doing it if you don't want to provision the API portal. So just wanted to add that. All right, sorry, back to Copilot Studio. Now what we want to use is OAuth 2. That's the right way to do this. And here's where we can start to populate those values that we were just copying from our app registration. So go ahead and copy and paste your client and your secret, and then we'll pause the video there. Okay, so I've got my client ID, I've got my secret. Now, what is my authorization URL? So this is kind of interesting, and I got a tip from one of our engineers. So Arjun, thank you. He showed me a foolproof way to get the authorization URL, the token URL, and the refresh URL. So let me flip over to VS Code. You can use Postman or any other sort of REST client you want, but this will be sort of the surefire way to get the right info. All right, so some of this I'm gonna have to blur out just to avoid leaking some sensitive info, but what you want to do, and I'll include this link in the description of the video, is you want to go ahead and call this particular URL. You don't need a token. You don't need to be authenticated. Basically, it's going to be logon.microsoftonline.com/yourtenantid followed by v2.wellknown OpenID configuration. So this is super important, and this is going to be helpful for us. So what we can see here is that we do start with let's scroll down towards the bottom. Let's start with our authorization URL, right? So back in Copilot Studio, we see authorization URL. So sorry for flipping back and forth, but wanted to make sure we call that out. So this is this value here, authorization URL. So let's head back over to Bruno, our REST client. Now we scroll down, we can see authorization endpoint here. This is the value that we want to go ahead and get. So basically it's going to include your tenant ID, followed by OAuth 2/v2.0/authorize. So go ahead and copy this particular value. And you can go ahead and paste that in the authorization URL. So now flip back, we'll go after the token URL and the refresh URL. These are going to be the same values. Now towards the top, we see this token endpoint. This is going to be the value that we go ahead and collect. So go ahead and copy this value. It ends in OAuth 2/v2.0/token. All right, so paste those in. Those will be exactly the same as I mentioned before. Now we need to deal with scopes. So this was that value from the app registration that I had asked you to go ahead and copy, and it's going to start with API://. So go ahead and it ends in user_impersonation. So go ahead and select that. So now we're at the point where we can go ahead and create this. Now we are going to need this redirect URL. This will be generated for us, but make sure you copy this value once you go ahead and hit the create button. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we can see that that was completed successfully, and we have this URL. Go ahead and copy this, save it. And what we need to do is we have to go back and update that app registration in Azure. If we don't, we won't have success when we go ahead and create a connection. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm back in my app registration. I've clicked on Authentication. Now I'm going to add a platform. So click that button. Then go ahead and click Web. And then in the top input box, go ahead and paste your value there. Click Configure. It should say it's successfully updated, and then you should be good from that perspective. Now you can head back over to Copilot Studio. And in Copilot Studio, we'll go ahead and click Next. And we need to go ahead and now create a connection. So click on this drop down, and then click on Create New Connection. And then go ahead and click Create. Okay, now we see that it shows up as a tool, Logic Apps Product MCP. Let's just go ahead and click on this, and then let's let this load. And there's kind of a couple things that we're going to look for. So obviously the first is we still have our connection. It's green, it's healthy. That's great. Then we want to make sure that it can enumerate our tools. So in this case, we only had one, right? We have one workflow. It's called Get Items. And then here's the description. So that's why when you're an API center, it is important to go ahead and basically include a relevant description. Okay, we can go ahead and test this, right? With our panel here, we can just go ahead and say, show me product reviews. The agent will then go ahead and try to match that with any descriptions that we have from our tools. Here we can see this product feedback. This is actually coming back from that Logic app. We can actually go validate that. So here we're in our Logic app. We've got our workflow, Get Items. Then we can head over here and look at the run history. And we can see that we've got an execution that just went ahead and took place. We can actually go ahead and follow the breadcrumbs and see all of the inputs and outputs from that perspective. Now, hey, let's make this a little bit more interesting. So we can filter on availability. And then we should be able to just see the feedback related to availability. All right, so that's the video. That's how you go ahead and set up Logic Apps as an MCP server. Really unlocks the enterprise in terms of the data sources that you can go ahead and connect to, and really bringing all of that data into your Copilot Studio agent. Thanks for checking this.